thank you so much for being here. I hope that the next 45 minutes to an hour are time that is time that you can say was well spent, and that you're going to take something away that you can use immediately in communicating with others. Specifically, as you know, title, Communicate with Charisma. So I want to ask you, let's start here. What comes to mind when you think of a hero? Courageous? Probably. Fearless? Maybe. Now, there's a concept that I really like to use when it comes to talking about facing fears. It's not mine. Certainly you've heard it. You've probably heard it before. And we call this journey of facing fears the hero's journey. And a lot of times we look at great athletes, right? Like one of my dear favorites, and may he rest in peace, Kobe Bryant or LeBron James, or great Olympians, right? Former presidents, current presidents, Obama, Biden, etc. And we tend to forget that they didn't just arrive at success, but rather each of these elites faced their own hero's journey. These journeys are filled with obstacles, with failures, with triumph, with everything in between, everything you and I experience. So it's my hope that over the next few minutes and over the next hour, I'm able to tell some stories, maybe enlighten you presently with my own hero's journey. And one that I have certainly, across my life had a number of paths, a number of stories and journeys, hero's journeys within my larger, grander life. But I want to focus on this one very specific event. Take you way back to when I was 18 years old. And a very eventful day. I'm going to share that with you. So before I get there, I just want to give you a little bit about myself, okay? I was a kid that was afraid of heights. I would climb trees and be unable to get down. So I was the kid that would have my parents have to come get me from my friend's house, talk me out of the tree, and bring me back down to earth, right? I was sometimes so frozen in fear I could not move. So it's just to say that the day that I decided to what turned out to be quite a rewarding and fulfilling experience, it was the day that I overcame my greatest fear, which was my made-up fear of heights. It was the day that I went skydiving. So let me take you back, because it's a day I'll never, ever forget. There we were. It seemed like a great idea. Let's go skydiving. Oh, yes. Let's do that. 18 years old. As that Saturday drew closer, drew nearer, I became far more fearful, far more focused on all that could go wrong, right? The story was playing out. The chute's not going to open. Why would I do this, that, or the other? As I was driving up to Santa Barbara, where we ended up driving from, jumping from where the airfield was, I remember feeling incredibly sick. I was nauseous. I was sweaty, right? My body was numb. It was just super heavy. I couldn't really speak. Sound familiar? The next thing I knew, we were at the airfield. We were signing documents. I was in the plane hangar getting suited up for my what would be jump. And next thing I knew, I was in the plane and I was flying at 14,000 feet. They scoot me to the edge of the chair. I'm strapped to somebody. They say, Todd, get to the edge of the plane. Get to the door. They open it up. They thrust it open. Oh, right? Engine, propeller. I can remember standing there at the edge of the door, freaking out, unsure of what I was going to do, hanging on for dear life. And right then, right at that moment, as I was asking myself, am I really going to do this? We tumbled out of the plane. And I remember thinking to myself as I saw the plane up and tumbling out, right? What did I just do? But the answer to that question, what did I just do? It was quickly answered. So here I am now, screaming towards Earth. It's 130 miles an hour, just right? Screaming towards Earth, out of control. This is when I should have been most afraid, most fearful. But that's not what happened. What happened in that moment was this calm came over me. This feeling of euphoria and bliss. And everything just seemed so right with the world. I could see the ocean. I could see schools. I could see houses. I had not a care in the world. I was, you know, I was ecstatic. I was euphoric. And I reached the ground, incredibly elated, but incredibly tired from what I had just experienced. And I sat there kind of contemplating, what did I just do? What had happened? And what I realized, what this feeling, this calm, like, the answer to my question of why did I just do this? It wasn't answered with words, but rather with a feeling. This feeling of power, this feeling of courage, of knowing that I could accomplish absolutely anything had filled my soul. And I had faced and conquered just one of my greatest fears. Now, why was this a defining moment in my life? Why do I bring us back to start, communicate with charisma when I was facing one of my greatest fears? Well, the lesson that I'd like you to take away from this story, and what I took away, was that the obstacle that I faced was not actually skydiving. No, the obstacle I faced was not something I could see. It was not something I could even touch. The obstacle was simply, not so simply, but simply the fearful thoughts that I had in my mind. Now, look, you know as well as I do that fear is a part of life. It's normal. We all experience it. Sometimes it's there to protect us. We're going to talk about that later. But it's really what we choose to do with that fear that makes all the difference. We can let that fear stand and serve as an obstacle towards our success, towards our progress, towards, say, speaking up, towards offering ideas, speaking up in the boardroom, speaking up with our colleagues, speaking up with our boss, speaking up with our partner, right? We can let that fear guide us any which way. We can let it stop us, or we can let it propel us. We can let it fill us, right? We can embrace it and actually realize that that fear can be the motivating factor towards us winning. Next time, and I know it's going to happen soon, you're faced with those difficult conversations at work and with your partner. Next time you're questioning whether or not you should say something, I'm going to encourage you to proceed with confidence when you feel that fear, knowing very well that as soon as you face it, as soon as you challenge it, as soon as you're on the other side of it, you're going to recognize, kind of ask yourself, like, what was I so afraid of in the first place? Why was I so fearful? Because what you're going to realize, as I did, was that fear was not real, and that really it was just something that you had invented and made up for yourself. You have all the controls to how you manage your mind. And so moving forward today, one of the topics we're going to talk about, and as we're going to segue into, is like some speaking anxiety, right? Some different things. That's where we start here, right? That's why we start with a story about fear. Fear serves, as we segue to speaking now, fear serves as an obstacle towards giving yourself to the moment. Fear serves as an obstacle towards you embracing the art, the artistry, the moment, and the potentiality that exists when and before as you speak. And yes, I did say artistry. So let's dive into it, shall we? As you can see on the quote, I'm going to read it to you. Speaking is like a feast at which the dishes are made to please the guests, not the chef. You could say communication is like a feast at which the dishes are made to please the guest and not the chef, right? Speaking, communicating is an art, like cooking, like composition or composing music, if you will. Everything we do in cooking, in composition, in speaking, is characterized by choice. It's characterized by choice. We have seemingly unlimited amount of choices when it comes to speaking. So what we're going to talk about today is not some one-size-fits-all solution to dealing with anxiety or some of the language habits we've formed, or some of the habits we've formed with the body or the voice, right? We can't give you an answer as to here's exactly what we should do, but we can raise the ideas, give and provide recommendations and tips, but have you explore really yourself and the other. And in doing so, raise, which is what we're going to do today, try to raise our emotional intelligence, what we call our EQ, our emotional intelligence quotient. Try to raise our awareness of self and other so that we might make choices, unlimited amount of choices, so that we might make choices that better engage that our audience, that are perhaps more impactful, and really just get us the result that we're striving towards with our audience, both for them and for ourselves. So that's what we're going to do here today. Much like art, and just like I said about composition, we have the quote here on the screen about being a chef. I want you to consider what it is you're doing when you speak. Like, what are you really doing when you speak? Do you hear that? It's silence. You're interrupting the silence. I'm interrupting the silence right now. And I have an unlimited amount of choices as to how I'm going to interrupt it. There's a million ways this could go. So I want you to think of yourself like an artist, maybe like a composer, right? How are you going to interrupt the silence when you speak? And if you think of yourself as that composer, right, or your favorite musician, right? How's the song, right? The speech, the speaking that you're going to offer, the communication, how's the song, the artistry, how's it going to play out? How are you going to form it? Because you're the creator. Does it start with a great guitar riff? I should tell you, I come from music in a former life. Does it start with, some drums? Does it start with just a great bass line? Is it just a vocal? Are there any vocals at all? Here's my point. If you start thinking about it like music and that infinite amount of choices, speaking, communicating is no different, whether to many in public speaking or interpersonally one-on-one. Now, certainly there's nuances as we change from one to many, but all of the choices that are the potential, the opportunity, it all exists in all of those moments. So like I said, I really want you to see yourself as an artist, someone who's going to interrupt that silence in a meaningful way, and do so and pay attention, be intentional with the way you do so, because it is, capital I-S, it is the tool, and perhaps the only tool I can think of outside of speaking and writing, that you have at your disposal to move people towards thoughts, new thoughts, beliefs, actions, behaviors. Think about it. I say all the time, I talk about three things: gold, guns, and speaking. That's right, gold, guns, and speaking. The first two, they're influential, they're persuasive, gold and guns. You can bribe people, you can threaten people. They're awfully persuasive. But when you think about the tools available to you, I think focusing on the ability to communicate with others in a way that is moving, certainly in all of our best interests. And part of the reason that we're sitting here today, and I applaud you for taking a step in the direction towards honing these skills. And I'm sure many of you, all of you, are very good at it. And that's the funny thing, right? Much of what we're talking about is taken for granted, meaning we don't focus on it very often because we do it all the time. So I applaud you for being here today and taking some time out of your day to focus on, this very real tool of moving people towards change, thought, belief, action, change of thought, belief, and action, behavior, which is speaking. So we've got all these choices. Let's get to some material, right? We've got all these choices. Here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you by the end of today, at least, that's the goal, is how we can manage all the choices, as I said, and the emotions that come with stepping in to this spotlight. And at the end of this, here's what we're going to cover. Okay, a couple things. We're going to be able to better control your speaking anxiety. So I'll give you some exercises, some tips for how to do that. We're certainly going to raise and bring up some common, as it says there, habits that are hurting your credibility as a speaker, right? Some charisma killers. And then finally, we're going to look at the voice and the body and delivery, how they function, how they operate, what they entail. and give you some tips about playing with all of that in a way that, might just lead to the impact that you're after. Now, I selected this picture here. I don't know if any of you caught the inauguration, but this young speaker here was brilliant in the way that she offered her ideas. And if you look at this picture right now, if you see the way because we're going to get to body language, right? The voice and the body and delivery, you can see her palms are open. She's inviting you in to see the world in some small way, in the way that she sees it, which is all you're trying to do when you speak. Invite the world in. She's open. She's smiling. Her eyes are on everyone. And she's inviting you in. So what we're striving here today, among other things, is to offer ideas around what we call invitational speaking, where we invite other people in. Like, let's make it count. Try to get everything out of the way. I know you might have some food and or kids or, parents or spouses or partners, something around. They're welcome to join in. A little bit about me, just so you know who the crazy weird person is that's in front of you telling you all these stories and guiding you through some of this knowledge. Yes, I'm an ICF certified coach. That's the International Coaching Federation. I'm a senior coach and consultant with Sampson Coaching and Consulting, which many of you know about. I teach at Cal State Northridge as a university professor. I love being a speaker coach, from TEDx to CEOs to presentations from executives. It's just a great joy. It brings me a lot of pleasure to see people step out of their comfort zone and achieve things that they were, curious if they could actually do and step into. So I get a lot of joy out of participating in the positive growth and development of others, which is what being a speaker coach allows me to do, and stuff like this. And then I just drop in there that I'm a former senior music executive, because a lot of what my life entailed prior to becoming a college professor and a consultant was the acquisition of, or the selling of, the offering of talent, right? So I was an A&R guy, which stands for artist and repertoire. So I would find, sign, and acquire and launch artists into the world, into pop culture. It was a lot of fun. So a lot of my knowledge about influence and persuasion does come from a life spent in the entertainment world. So that's a little bit about me. I just wanted to make sure you knew who it was that was here in front of you. So let's dig into it. I want to really take some time now. I want you to think of the Wizard of Oz, all right? Sure, try to use relatable examples, right? Wizard of Oz. We're going to try to pull that curtain back and try to understand, so we could see Wizard of Oz, guy at the controls, just pulling the levers. We're going to try to thrust that back and pull back the curtain on yourself, so that you can start to understand more of what's going on with you, to demystify and destigmatize some of the anxiety that comes with speaking. So as it says there, what if, because self-fulfilling prophecies can really go any which way. What if the self-fulfilling prophecy, instead of focusing on all that could go wrong, you allowed yourself to embrace, you allowed yourself to focus on all that could go right? You know how the saying goes, everything you want is on the other side of that fear. And if that fear is speaking, and we've already established that speaking is the number one tool, basically the only tool you have for moving people, then again, addressing our own anxiety and fears about what comes up for us is in our best interest. So, speaking anxiety, destigmatizing the discomfort. I want you to think about please think about when you feel speaking anxiety. And if you want to take it out of the realm of speaking, you could just think about, when do you feel anxiety? When do you feel anxiety? You feel it, if you think way back to, when you had to ask someone on a date, that was, some of us, that was a while ago. If you had to think about, I know there's some students out there, if you had to think about when you left for college, or that you're going to leave for college, you're coming back to college. Some of us have left, we all had to leave the workplace, we're coming back, right? So if you've ever played sports, if you're on a softball team, right? there's a number of times all across the day that we're experiencing anxiety. If you think about it when it comes to speaking, when you have a presentation, if I were to ask you to speak right now, if I told you there was an assignment that we were all going to come on camera at the end of this discussion, we may start to feel a little bit of anxiety, right? So what I want us to do is really recognize for ourselves, when does it come up for us? Like, when does it really come up? So there's 4 times that I want you to note, because if we can understand when it comes up for us, and I wrote this question at the bottom here, when is it most intense for you? I really want you to think about, consider this question. Pre-preparation anxiety, before you even are preparing for something, just like, I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know how I'm going to say it. I don't even know really what I'm supposed to do, but I'm stressed about it. That's pre-preparation. Preparation anxiety is when you're actually engaged in the activity of creation. Pre-performance is, the night before, the morning of. For me, I had a little pre-preparation anxiety before, pre-performance anxiety before I came on here today, and then the actual performance, right? These 4 stages of anxiety. I'd like you to ask yourself and recognize, and if you have something to write with, take a note and just note the four stages and where you feel it most intensely. Like, where does it really come at you? When you're creating it, right before you speak, if you're in a boardroom and your boss asks you, like, hey, Todd, what do you think? Carissa, what do you think? What do you think? Maybe you get anxiety at that moment. So I want you to sit with that for a moment. Think about when it comes up for you and when it's most intense. And I want you to ask yourself, what does it actually feel like? Meaning, how does it manifest physiologically in your body? What happens to you when you are stressed and feeling anxiety, and specifically when you're feeling speaking anxiety, right? So I made a little list. Some things may come up, may be relatable. Sweating, just being a sweaty mess, right? Your palms, your pits, your head, right? Certainly shaking, your voice shaking, your hand shaking. We might turn red. Our mind might go blank. We may start using filler words. We might start really, really, really increasing the rate of our speech because we just want to get it over with. We just want to get to that end. We just want to get to that conclusion. So I'm just going to say it as fast as I can. These things happen, right? And not to mention upset stomach, nervousness, butterflies, right? These are all things that we know we experience on some level, somewhere. Which of them are most common for you? All right, we're trying to identify, when does it come up for us most intensely? Pull back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz so that we can see our minds, right? Raise our self-awareness, raise our emotional intelligence right now and go, okay, I know when it happens. It's most intense here. I kind of feel it here and here. And then how does it show up in my body? Oh, I'm turning red. I'm sweaty. I know I lose my train of thought constantly. Right? If these are things that are happening for you, I want to demystify some of what's going on. On some level, your brain has taken over, right? It's not like your rational brain. It's not at all. It's your what we have to do is regain control and re-engage our rational, logical brain and wrestle it back from that primal, right, brain that is really serving to keep us safe. As it says that your brain's trying to protect you, right? So you're in fight or flight. That's why all of this is going on. You're in fight or flight, much like when I'm skydiving, much like, when there's a lion in front of you about to eat you, even though that's never going to happen, much like when a hyena is being chased across the prairie by a lion for dinner. You experience the same hormone release, the same levels of stress and cortisol, right? When you're anxious and preparing or about to give a speech, your mind and therefore your body does not know the difference. So what do we have to do? Like I said, we have to wrestle it back. We have to bring it back and re-engage our rational brain. So how can we do that? What are some techniques now that we know when it happens? Now that we know what it feels like and how it shows up, manifests physiologically in our body. And we even know, trying to demystify here and destigmatize, one, it's normal. Two, this is what's going on in you. So what do we do now? You say, Todd, what do I do? Couple tips and suggestions. You could use a number of them. You could just use one of them. There's certainly far more solutions, tips, exercises than I'm offering you here because we only have a certain amount of time. But here's what I got for you. Breathing exercises. So you can see Dr. Weil, right? He came up with this and has coined this 478 breathing exercise that has been used. I use it. I've used it in plenty of workshops. I use it for myself in the morning. I use it any time that I'm feeling stressed. I use it with my kids. I use it with my coaching clients. I encourage you, I'll do a little bit with you for a second. I encourage you to use this the next time you're experiencing any sort of anxiety, right? But what it is 478. It's first you breathe in and out, in and out, in and out 3 times so that you can get your breath going. Then you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, and you breathe out for 8. And what this does is it resets. They've done a lot of research on this. It resets your system and brings you back into homeostasis. So I'm just going to demonstrate it one time. If you could breathe with me, this is what you could practice it right now. You could take one deep breath in, and then we'll do one round through of just 4, 7, 8. So take one deep breath in. And then in for 4. Hold for 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out for 8. And that's the whole thing. You do that 5, 6, 7 times through. Take some deep breaths after. You will feel and see, but you will feel a significant shift in your energy, in your mood, in your calmness, much as you see in me right now, just with one breath. Now, I want to make one note about that before I move on to the other tips. And you can look up Dr. Weil. He can walk you through this whole breathing exercise. It's a great activity. But one thing that he will recommend and that I recommend, make sure you when you breathe out, because the pursing your lips and pushing it out when you breathe out, it gets your mind to focus on the sound, but it also forces air out. So you're doing the breathing properly. That's the first suggestion. 4, 7, 8. Certainly a lot of YouTube videos out there you can follow and go look up. Music, playing music has been shown, research statistically, when you play maybe not the most angsty music unless you're into that sort of thing, but music that calms you, that you enjoy, it can certainly have a soothing effect. Music affects mood. We know that for a fact. So playing your favorite music or something soothing that you know can either hype you up or calm you down. You got to know yourself. Remember, raising our emotional intelligence certainly is a positive solution. Planning and being intentional. This is the idea of not procrastinating. Certainly, you're going to feel the highest level of anxiety if you don't prepare. So procrastination is your worst enemy when it comes to speaking and presenting. If you don't have time to prepare, this is the type of preparation. What we're doing right now and what we can do in the future. This is the type of preparation that allows you to be on your toes in the moment. On the value add, I would always recommend to you and will always recommend to you to focus on your material, focus on your message, focus on what you have of value to offer others rather than the fact that they may not like it. Self-fulfilling prophecies can go any which way. I said that earlier. I'm going to say it again. You get to choose which way the prophecy goes, up, down, or sideways. Right? They're going to love it. They're going to be excited. And as I said here, with this is segueing perfectly into reframing the fear into excitement. Remember, I just told you that the body doesn't know the difference, really doesn't know the difference between fear and excitement. They show up in the body and the mind in the same way. That we get to label it however we choose. So I'm going to encourage you reframing labeling as excitement. We could say, I'm excited for this conversation that's about to happen. I'm not presenting, I'm not speaking, I'm not giving a formal address. I'm going to have a conversation with some people I enjoy that I'm excited to offer some value, some ideas to them, and I'm going to see what happens. Let's see what happens. That's a whole different prophecy than focusing on all that could go wrong. And let's be honest, the mind is really, really good at focusing and worrying on all that could go wrong. So here's my last tip for you before we move on to some of those charisma killers. The 5-second rule. All right, this is my last suggestion for you. It's called the 5-second rule. It's very simple. You can count when you recognize, because we did the when and the what. Like, when does it happen? What does it feel like? When you recognize that, since we've pulled back the curtain, you can say, oh, look at that. Look at that. I'm feeling anxious right now. That's to be expected. And then you can count yourself down from 5 to 1. It's that simple to say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What I'm doing is I'm re-engaging my logical brain. I'm wrestling it back from my more primal amygdala, right? That's firing off and trying to protect me and putting me in fight or flight. I'm wrestling it back by counting. There's other methods to doing this as well. Some people tell you to look at trees. Some people to remind yourself that your feet are on the ground. What you do is you count from 5 to 1 and then offer yourself what we call an anchoring thought. Something that brings you peace, that brings you joy, that brings some solace, some harmony, some safety, some security to the mind. Because right now, not right this moment, but in the moment that you're feeling anxious, what's going on is you're in fight or flight and or freeze, and you know what's going on in your body. So we're wrestling it back. We're counting from 5 to 1. We're offering our mind an anchoring thought on right after the 5 to 1 to remind ourselves all that could go right. As I said, I'm excited for this conversation is one I like to remind myself of. I have so much value. They're gonna love it. These are things I tell myself. Now, whether or not it's true, I don't know, but let's be honest. When things stink, you typically forget about them. And when things go well, they're memorable. So have no fear. Even if it stinks, it's not gonna go that poorly, right? Oh, I kid. None of it stinks, and that's the joke. None of it stinks. We're always doing pretty well. All right. So this is just this idea that we really can't change the situation. You're speaking, you've got circumstances, you've got situations. We don't really change those circumstances. We have the opportunity to change them by first changing our relationship to the situation so that we can show up with our best self, in this case, with our most charismatic self. What we're trying to do is remove the anxiety. I'm segueing now, trying to remove the anxiety, remove some of the fear, destigmatize it, and kind of normalize it at the same time so that we can change our relationship to the situation. All right. Well, let's move right along. That was great. Hopefully, there's some value in those exercises and on understanding just all what's going on in you. Hang with me till the end of this. I just want to remind you, I'm going to offer you some time at the end for some questions. So if you have any questions, certainly you can jump in and chime in if anything, comes up in the interim. But, you can jump in the chat, ask some questions. If there's anything pressing that I've talked about that I wasn't clear about, we can address that at the end or right here in real time. All right, charisma killers. We're going to cover 3 of them. Hedging, tag questions, and as it says there, but, and we'll get there. So what are these charisma killers? The first one, yes, hedging. What is hedging? Listen, I want to be real clear up front about this. In no way are we saying that hedging is always wrong or a bad thing. Not in any way, shape, or form. I want to be really clear. Hedging has its purpose. It has a reason to exist. And when we say hedging, softening or reducing the impact of, a sentence by adding something to it, right? By phrasing it in a way that makes it sometimes more respectful, sometimes more, what's the word? Softer. It softens the idea. And there's a lot of reasons to do this, like in our interpersonal, our close one-on-one relationships with our partner, with our kids, even with sometimes with colleagues, you know, in intimate relationships. We're trying to do brainstorming, come up with ideas, new creative ideas. It can be very useful to soften an idea. Don't get me wrong. It's totally normal to do this. We do it all the time. What I'm offering and suggesting to you is that you consider how often do you do it when you're presenting an idea that really should be coming with a far greater level of certainty. And specifically in the workplace, I'll focus on here for a second. We're trying not to be angry, boastful. We're trying to be respectful. Sometimes we're not trying to be too direct. We don't want to be abrupt or impolite, right? So these hedging things come up. Here's what hedging sounds like. I'm sorry, I was just thinking. Maybe we could try. I mean, I don't know. It's just a thought. I really don't know if this is the right idea, direction we were going. I was just kind of thinking over here to myself. I mean, I could be wrong. It's possible I'm wrong. I really didn't know. I really don't know if this is the best idea. It's probably not the greatest idea. All of these examples I just gave you, see on the screen here, all of these have a time and a place. We'll say that. We'll say that. But when you're trying to persuade someone, when you're trying to engage them in a discussion, to declare something is the way, is the answer, is the solution, it may, I say may, and I'm hedging there because I don't want to give you an absolute, a good place for the hedge. It may devalue what you're offering. I don't think it did there. So we often preface our ideas, we devalue them, we dismiss them, we kind of take their power away before we've ever even offered them. That's what hedging does. We are uncertain and we let people know it. And the effect that that has, specifically in like the workplace when we're trying to come up with ideas, brainstorm solutions and stuff, the effect that that can have is that, you know, the receiver might say, well, to themselves, like, why did you offer it? Like, if you're not sure of the idea, what did you bring it up for in the first place? Like, now we're not sure. I don't know what to think of it. You're not even sure of it, right? And here's my point. No, you are. You have fantastic ideas. You have excellent ideas. And offering them to others, you deserve to be heard. Your ideas certainly matter. We want you to speak up and present your ideas without hedging, without qualifying them. And we're going to get to some more qualifiers in a moment. Like, I don't have time to hit all the qualifiers, but when you say hopefully, honestly, basically, these are all ways of sort of hedging and cheapening and weakening the great idea that you had to offer. So let's pay attention to where that serves a real purpose, and let's be really careful about where it does not serve our best interests. So I just used the word qualifier or qualify. Hedging is a type of qualifier. Qualifying your thoughts is often an instant credibility killer, specifically in the workplace. As I said, just to bring it back together, it comes from the desire to appear humble. So I get it. Not overbearing. I get it. Not arrogant. I get it. I appreciate and applaud this effort. Saying things like, I might be wrong, this might be off, but doesn't make you typically sound humble. It just weakens. It shows a lack of confidence. So the impact of hedging on persuasion, undercutting, as well as weakening. Let's instead state our opinion in a calm and open manner, and then keep our attitude of curiosity, questions, curiosity open to see what comes next. Next topic. Another type of qualifier, tag questions. Tag questions. Now, This is putting stuff on the other end. And I'm going to go real quick through this. Won't you? Can't you? Shouldn't you? Didn't, don't they? Isn't it? Won't you? When we're nervous, when we're uncertain, when we're insecure, when we're looking for validation, we turn our statements, our declarative statements, into questions. Don't cheapen it by tagging a question onto the end of it. Offer the idea and remain curious and open to hearing the ideas of others. Now, two places that you could certainly use tag questions if you're really, really trying to gain agreement or gain compliance, they can be a useful tool. But as a leader, I got to be honest with you, when you say to, if you say to your staff, you really should, Todd, you really should have checked these X, Y, and Z boxes, right? Shouldn't you have? Shouldn't you have? You really should have. Shouldn't you have? It can be a little demeaning and condescending when it comes from a leader. So just pay attention to how you're coming off. Again, we're just trying to pull back the curtain. We don't have a one-size-fits-all answer. What we can do is raise the things, raise our self-awareness, raise our awareness of others, improve our emotional intelligence so that we might, and I'm not qualifying that, I'm being honest, make choices that are more productive, more useful, more valuable in achieving whatever it is we're trying to achieve for ourselves and for everybody else who's involved. Last charisma killer, and then we'll get to the voice embodying delivery, the but, and. The but, and. Ooh. I want to give you some examples here. So when you're giving feedback, what if I said to you, oh gosh, you know what? If it was to me like, Todd, you're a really great presenter. Oh, but with more experience, you'll be better. Just wait. Now, couldn't it be so much easier, actually more productive and useful to say, you're a really great presenter, and with some more experience, you will be even better. It's like, hey, I know you communicate with charisma, and with some support, you will communicate with even more charisma, right? I don't have to basically, what's the word I'm looking for? When I say but, I cancel out everything that came before it. Not just when I'm speaking publicly, but when I'm speaking privately. And yes, I'm talking about with your kids, with your partner, with your friends. Try changing your buts to ands. A small change can go a very, very long way. You remember the song, Conjunction Junction? What's your function? Hooking up words and phrases, right? You can change a lot by changing very little. I gave you an example of a backhanded compliment when it came to feedback, right? You'd be a great presenter, but with more experience, you'd be better. Let's look at how this works out, say, in another example. So here's the example. Can we put together in dialogue? Let's say your boss comes to you, says, she says, hey, can we put together an instructional packet to guide the team through the next steps in the project? So here's a couple. Let's see the difference between the but and the and. Yes, okay, but they probably won't have the time or patience to wade through a lot of the detail. Versus, yes, and since they're so busy, we can host the Cliff Note style conference call and walk them through the steps at a very high level. One is agreeable, one is open, one is curious, one is solution focused. That's the latter. And the former, the but, it speaks for itself. It's confrontational. It's combative. Let's look at another example. Same example. Can we put together the instructional packet? Yes, but they need a set of tools to help them make the recommendations they will present to that they will present to the leaders. Versus, yes, and we could put together a summary PowerPoint they can use to explain the steps to others, like the leadership team, without going into all the details of the packet. It's yes and. It's not but. I'm just looking at the chat here. Yeah, I'm reading what you're saying. When we say but, we forget all the good things we mentioned prior to saying but. We only focus on the bad things mentioned right after the but. And that's exactly right. That is what it does. It negates everything and it puts the focus on the confrontation. And that's not really where we want to put it. If we want to be agreeable, we want to be open, we want to be solution minded, right? We want to go for the and. I'll give you one more example. But the leaders aren't ready to make the decision to make decisions. They need more market, more trend data, plus input from the business. Yes, and we can help the leaders get that market data, make those informed decisions. Again, I know you see the difference here. It's a small and subtle change, much like eliminating hedging, much like the way we unconsciously kind of just out of creatures of habit tag questions onto the end of things. We also would do well to replace our buts often with and. Be more agreeable and well, I said and again. counter what you see going on here with the buts. All right, deep breath. I'm throwing a lot at you. I wanted to make this as valuable as possible. I know I've kind of packed a lot in here. So let me sum up, get us to the voice and body and delivery. My point about charisma killers. All right. It's clear that this second exchange that I just offered you is far more productive, right? The result is not to debate, it doesn't end in stalemate. Rather, it's a comprehensive action plan. It's something that we can do and take action on. Now, I don't know if you've read Daniel Pink's books on influence, but he argues that we're all salespeople, right? Even if our job doesn't say it in the title. So we would do well, as I've been offering you here, to recognize that the skills of influence and persuasion, relationship building are at the core of how we do absolutely everything. Speaking, writing, specifically here, speaking, it is our resource. It is our tool. So this is just further ways to deepen our connections, to build our connections, and try the yes and technique at your next meeting, with your next one-on-one with your boss, next time you're with your partner or your kids, and see what happens. I think you're going to find that buy-in emerges. Last section, charisma. Your voice, your body. What are we aiming at? What's the goal here? 3 things. And we could debate this all day long. There's no need to. Certainly, there's far more pieces than I'm going to offer you here that go with charisma. But a lot of the research focuses on these 3 attributes, these 3 characteristics. That charisma, could say, equals or entails being present or strong presence, confidence, and as you see there, warmth. Warmth. And if you think back to that image that I showed you, right, of the inauguration, right at the start of this presentation, she was present, she was confident, she was warm, and you got that all from a still image. So your ability to embody these characteristics while speaking to many or to one, the success of what you're offering kind of lives and dies. It rests on your ability to embody these characteristics and to communicate presence, confidence, and warmth. So if you ask yourself, where is it that I feel when I'm speaking, that I feel most present, most warm, most confident? I'm going to guess, this is a speculation, it's a guess, that when you're telling a story, because we're all pretty good storytellers. Walt Fisher, rhetorical communication scholar, said we're the storytelling animal. People, we're the storytelling animal. It's what we do. It's our nature. I suspect that you are very good at telling stories. And I bring that up because when are you most present, confident, warm? It's when you're telling stories. So when we go through the voice and the body, now I want you to consider, because I don't have a one size fits all answer, how do you use these characteristics? How do you use your volume to embody presence, confidence, and warmth? How do you use rate and pacing, the speed at which you speed up and slow down, the rate at which you speak, pitch, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And I know I didn't sing it very well. That was on purpose, but you heard it in your head. Your intonation, your tone. And like I said earlier, you're pausing. The way you interrupt the silence is volume, rate, pacing, pitch, tone, and how you interject pausing into your speaking. How you let things rise and fall. How you leave space, like I'm doing now with pausing. Time to reflect. Time for me to gather thoughts. Time for you to retain information. Ability to highlight a point and say, oh, you know what? That was really important. I know because he paused. Now I'm making light of the voice in delivery, which accounts for about, 30 some odd, some say they're about 37% of the attitude and feeling of any message. So the reason I've chosen to focus on the voice and body and delivery, remember I said earlier that communication is taken for granted, meaning we do it all the time. We think we're really good at it. So we don't really think about the voice, how we play with our voice, the body. We don't really plan out and be intentional to affect people in the ways that we like with all that's going on here. So I bring up your voice. I know you know your voice, but I want you to think about how you play with this to bring life to a message, to animate a message, much like I'm trying to do here for you today. The body and delivery, some functions, and then we'll get to some Q&A. Very quickly, we talk about nonverbal delivery in one big, I'm going to talk about it in one big ball. Nonverbal delivery is your voice and your body, not your words, but the way you use your voice and the way you use your body, your gestures, your face, the way you use your general body movements, the way you appear physically in your dress, the objects you hold, as it says there, your physical appearance. All of that plays into your credibility as a speaker, whether we can trust you, whether we feel goodwill from you, whether or not we want to follow you, whether we're going to believe you. Yeah. So we're bringing all this to your attention to say, are there things that you do that could improve, right? Are there ways that we could use the voice and body and delivery that would further enhance what we're trying to offer? If you recognize that 93 or so percent of the attitude and feeling when we take the voice and the body, that 93% of the attitude and feeling of any message is coming through all this other stuff, this nonverbal delivery, we start to realize why some of what we offer, even if we get the words right, doesn't always connect. So I said overdetermined, I said taken for granted. What does nonverbal delivery actually do? Like what are these gestures? What does our face do? Well, first off, it clarifies meaning. Like I could say, hey, you know what? Last weekend I went fishing and I caught a fish that was this big. It was this big. It was huge. It was this big. Overdetermined and taken for granted. Where's the gesturing? It was this big, right? We don't always consider what to do with these. That's why we have to tell presidents and speakers, we got to teach them what to do with their hands, right? Go like this, go like this. No. These clarify meaning, and I want you to start paying attention to how you use gestures to bring a message to life. Open palms. It's one thing I could tell you is very inviting rather than some of those general body movements that might be more closed off. We'll get there in a second. So our nonverbal delivery clarifies meaning, establishes a relationship between you and your audience, managing the emotional rapport, meaning the relationship between you and your audience, the goodwill, the trust, the rapport, all of that is at the height of importance for you as a speaker. Because until we have some of that trust built, just like today, you weren't going to come along. That's part of why I told you a story to start this presentation, because I wanted you to know a little bit more about me and feel me as a person. I wanted to humanize myself, especially because we can't talk. Lastly, establish a relationship. Lastly, establishes your credibility. And we've already hit on this one big time. Whether or not we are stiff, closed off, right? Open, inviting. Remember proximity. You might have seen me lean in multiple times to mimic proximity, right? To be more intimate with you and say, hey, come on, come in closer. Come on, here we go. Listen up. The way we use all of it raises or detracts from our credibility. And so I bring it all to your attention, the voice, the body, not to give you a prescription, but for you as a rational thinking, a strategic adult, to go like, here's where I could do better. Now, a couple suggestions. I want to get to some tips. Animate your facial expressions. I don't care who you're speaking to, right? But the more you have more muscles centrally located in your face than anywhere else in your body, right? And I'm not a zoologist of any sort, but I can at least look at dolphins, who I know have an amazing language, and I choose them on purpose to see, like, I don't know that they're doing everything with their face that we're doing here. Like, we have a special tool at our disposal. So please, I encourage you, I implore you, use all the muscles to your advantage. Communicate your charisma through your face, like smiling is such a great tool. I talk about establishing emotional rapport with your audience. What better than smiling? Not creeper smile, not weird smile, but like genuine, authentic smile that says, hey, I'm going to offer you something. We're going to have a good time together. And even if it's not like the best thing in the world, it's not going to be a bad time. So come on and come with me for a couple minutes. And we're going to, that's all you're trying to do. Invite someone in to see the world as you do for a little bit of it. Smiling for just a moment in time. Smiling communicates priority, inclusion, belonging. It means you matter. When your favorite recording artist, if you've ever been to a concert, when they look at you and smile, it's like the biggest deal of all time, because you got it in the club for a minute. So that goes to that next point. Animate your facial expression, specifically smiling. Maintain your eye contact. Eye contact lets people into the club. It also, with the smile, eye contact communicates priority and inclusion. It says you belong here. It says, I'm looking at you. You're with me. I'm with you. Come be with me. Which is everything that we're trying to use at our disposal to influence others to come along. Natural gesturing. You can see me here naturally gesturing all the time. It would be very unnatural for me to sit with my arms crossed. It would be very unnatural, but kind of natural habits we've come up with, like be aware of general body movements, goes along with natural gesturing. Like, I'm doing this because, like, what is this, like chicken wing? We call like a wounded, the wounded soldier. Like, I got like, I'm trying to hold papers under my arm. Like, what are all these weird hair flips and, shirt movements and, face rubbing? And I know I do a couple of them, but what we want to do is minimize these things and pay attention to the way that we move, that we carry our bodies, that we use our face, that we use our gestures, so that we might, and again, I'm not hedging, this is for real, might have a greater chance at influencing those people that we want to influence, not just for ourselves, but for them, right? I know many, if not most of you, are in professions, in places of service to other people in some facet of your life, and are leaders in some facet of your life. So everything we're talking about here is about charisma, credibility, influence, and our ability to communicate these things through those avenues that are at our disposal. So that brings us to the end. We've given you not just hopefully some at least entertaining stories, and hopefully I've served as a decent example of what it looks like to animate, communicate a message with charisma, and to share your passion. I hope I'm sharing my passion for speaking, for communicating, and for personal and professional development. I hope I'm communicating that well and animating the message well. What I promised you was some discussion on speaking anxiety, so we pulled the curtain back on that. I told you that we would certainly look at and address those charisma killers, hedging tag questions, and most certainly the or the but, and misspoke. And finally, we talked about how to use our voice and body and delivery, what those things serve, how they function, and then gave you some tips about how you could, better more effectively enact those things in your life. We raised some things to the level of consciousness, and now it's up to you as to what you are going to do with it. Are there any questions? What questions can I answer about anything that was offered here today? Frank, thank you very much. I appreciate you. Where do you look at in the Zoom? Great question. This is a skill set. At the camera. At the camera. I'm going to look off for a second to make sure. Yeah, catch myself for a second. Yeah, because ultimately it's like making eye contact. Hi. Look in the camera as best possible. Hope that answers the question. It's a skill you have to develop. It's one that you have to practice. Absolutely. Myself included. Myself included. Yeah. Good question. Can you talk a little more about presence? And we have 8 seconds on Zoom. Interesting. Okay. So when you say, I'm going to ask a follow-up. I know we have 8 seconds on Zoom. What do you mean by that? Like you just have a second to jump on? Like how do you be more present? First impressions. Yeah. So I would like you to think about what it is that is engaging to you about first impressions. Like, is it the way someone carries themselves? Is it the way they're like, if I came into the meeting and was back here, if I enter the meeting present, if we're on Zoom, presence, often eye contact, nonverbals, nodding, right? Feedback for whoever's speaking. And then when they come to you, being ready, having ideas and looking directly at them, being direct, just as if you were speaking to them in the boardroom and you were sitting there ready to go. So we tend to get a little lax on Zoom. And yes, there's a real thing as Zoom fatigue. But that first impression, how your dress, whether your technology is prepared and you're messing with it or not, when you show up, when it comes to Zoom, no different than showing up for a meeting. Someone shows up to your office and your office is ill prepared. It's no different. Or you show up to a meeting and you don't have your papers together. No different. Don't look them in the eye, slouch, lean back. All of the nonverbal and verbal delivery. And then, of course, I would say eliminate the hedging, eliminate the tag questions, replace buts with and. All of those things together, for practicing all of them, that's another way, which is why we talked about it, to establish presence, because you're not taking the power, you're not weakening the message or yourself, your own credibility, before it's had a chance to live. Well, that brings us to the end of it. I'm going to remind all of you, we have a podcast, Bridget and I. It's called The Right Questions Podcast. We offer things like this, like we have discussions about stuff like this all the time. Maybe not as formal in terms of lessons, but we're offering questions and we're exploring those questions every other week. So we encourage you to come check those out if you're not already. And we also will be offering far more free workshops and webinars. Until next time, I'll see you. Take care. Be good people, all right? And try to communicate with some more charisma. I hope this was valuable. Take care.